Yo, I'm sure everybody watching this is aware that My Hero Academia has just ended and the responses to it have been wild. Now, that's not surprising to me because this happens at the end of every big series, but what is surprising to me is how passionate I felt about it. Until My Hero Academia ended, I didn't realize how big of an effect it had on my life. Let's do a little Zaire history lesson. Back in 2018, I had almost no experience with anime. I had seen basic shit like Pokemon, Dragon Ball Z, but I don't think I even really understood what anime was. Like when I was watching Pokemon and Dragon Ball Z, I didn't even conceptualize them as anime. But I always had a vague interest in nerdy stuff. Like as a kid, I always had a strong interest in comic books and superheroes. Nerd. So it always felt like anime was right up my alley. But I was so separate from the community, I didn't even know where to start. I didn't even know that there were separate genres of anime. So I just had no catalyst or motivation to start it because I just didn't know where to start. Until sometime during the summer, I was just so bored of rewatching Family Guy and South Park episodes on repeat 24/7. I decided to go to Adult Swim, yes nigga, Adult Swim, and see exactly what anime were airing there. And that's when I came across My Hero Academia. I fell in love from the first episode. Not only did it have the Dragon Ball Z type of action I was used to, but it also had all the superhero shit that a little geek like me would appreciate. Something about this young, helpless kid in a world of superpowers with the most unattainable dream resonated with me on a level that no other story had to that point. I was obsessed with My Hero Academia in a way that could only be described as unhealthy. When season 3 was airing and Class 1A was getting attacked by Muscular and Dobby and all of them, I was staying up until 6 and 7 a.m. every Saturday to catch the episodes as they were uploaded on Funimation. And then as soon as season 3 ended, I picked up the manga and My Hero Academia became my first manga. And as much as I love My Hero Academia, I always stayed away from the community because yeah. So I think my viewpoint on My Hero Academia as a story has been very different from other fans. My opinion on the characters, on the themes, just because, you know, I haven't been affected by fandom brain rot, which has led to me being in an interesting position when discussing the ending of My Hero Academia. So I've not only been able to get a third-person perspective of the opinions of die-hard My Hero Academia fans on the ending, but also the idiots who haven't paid attention to My Hero Academia for hundreds of chapters and for some reason still think that their opinions on the ending are going to be at all accurate. A lot of the conversation around this ending has just been extremely frustrating because a lot of the criticisms have just been based in fundamental misunderstandings of the story and misinformation. First, let's talk about the spoilers. For the longest, as long as spoiler culture has gotten popular in manga, people have always been worried about what spoilers would do to the end of series. Like we always have the conversation about when One Piece ends, the spoilers are going to be horrible and probably unavoidable. But one thing I think we never thought about is how inaccurate the spoilers would be. And a lot of the horrible criticisms of this ending have been because of the spoilers. Some of them are valid, but we'll get into that later. Something that I've noticed about anime fandoms, and this doesn't end at My Hero Academia, basically every anime fandom does this, where anime fans will have certain wants and desires themselves, and they will place these values and desires on characters who don't actually share them. And Deku has been the biggest victim of this that I have seen in any anime or any manga in my life. Because a lot of the fantasies that fans had about Deku becoming a hero is not the same as the fantasies that Deku himself had. At the core of My Hero Academia, there's the idea of being selfless and helping your fellow human simply for that fact, because they are human. And Deku is the embodiment of this to the core. In the beginning of My Hero Academia, the culture is very much so hero obsessed. Your quirk is directly tied to how much value people seem to have in you as a person. So for Deku, someone without a quirk, he is valueless. And I think when a lot of anime fans see this kind of beginning to a series, they start injecting their own power fantasies into it. It becomes a thing of like, oh, Deku's gonna get strong, he's gonna power up, and he's gonna prove all these people wrong. He's gonna become the top hero and everyone's gonna have to look up to him. And I think this happens to like every shonen manga, to be honest. I call it the Naruto effect. People always want every single shonen MC to have the Naruto character arc, where they're an underdog, everyone looks down on them, but through hard work and determination, they rise to the top and get the glory in the end. And that kind of a story is cool, it works for Naruto, but it's not in line with who Deku is as a character and the messaging of My Hero Academia as a series. For Deku, the appeal of being a hero was never for the glory or being idolized. Deku just loved the idea of serving the public. His only wish was to be able to help people with a smile on his face. And on the surface, this dream sounds very grandiose, but at the core of it, Deku just wants to be beneficial and helpful to society. And in the beginning of the story, being a hero is the only way to do that is seen as meaningful and worthwhile by society. When we see Deku's class in the beginning talk about their dreams, every single person wants to be a hero. Heroes are looked at like gods. I actually think it's a really interesting commentary on celebrity culture in our real life. People are so obsessed with idolizing these larger than life figures that people that benefit society in small ways, like teachers, are thrown to the wayside. Nobody ever shows them any attention. And in the My Hero Academia world, everyone's dreams, even Deku's, are filtered through that lens. And it's so surprising to me that people didn't understand this about the ending, because it's one of the things that the story touches on the most. heroes through multiple different characters. I think the most popular and most obvious example is Stain. Stain's whole point was that people are becoming heroes for the wrong reason. Everybody wants to be a hero to be idolized or be rich. Nobody's doing it for the love of the game no more, man. But even with Stain, he filters his messaging through the idolization of All Might. And the idolization of All Might is something I've talked about a little bit before, but I don't think I've ever delved into the negative repercussions of All Might's existence in society. Because the existence of a symbol of peace creates a lot of negative things in the story that I think the story is very aware of, but the fans are not aware of at all. Because through All Might began the birth of this idolization of heroes to begin with, and it introduces this influx of people who want to be heroes for the wrong reason. And while the whole symbol of peace thing works for a time, after All Might retires, the flaws of it show itself very quickly. It leaves a power vacuum that nobody can fill. And basically the entire latter half of the story focuses on the effects of this power vacuum and what it says about society as a whole. Because once All Might leaves, everyone is looking for a new savior. And I think in the eyes of most fans, the idea was Deku was going to become that new savior, when really Deku opened everyone's eyes to the fact that they don't need a savior at all. And in this way, the ending to Deku's character is so fucking good. It's perfect. Over the course of the story, we see the effect that this idolization has on heroes themselves. It's something that Hawks talks about pretty early on in his character introduction, the idea that we need to create a society where heroes have time to kill. And I think it's pretty funny because it looks like it's just Hawks being an easygoing and lazy guy, but really it's an important change that hero society needed to undergo. This idea that heroes are going to be these saviors that save people from any and all danger, it's impossible. Even All Might struggles to keep up with that facade. It's just something that's unattainable. Around the time of the battle with the Paranormal Liberation Front, we see so many heroes quitting because they realize I'm just a person. I can't carry society on my back like All Might did. And through Deku's final fight with Shigaraki, he doesn't just become this symbol of, oh, I'm gonna save you every time you're in trouble. Through Japan watching Deku fight and seeing how hard he's struggling to solve their problems, they actually genuinely feel bad, which is something that was touched on before when they don't let Deku back into UA and Uraraka has to talk to them niggas like, this is just a kid. But just because he's a hero and he has this super strong quirk and he's been basically idolized by the public, the people don't even view him as human anymore. But through his fight with Shigaraki, Deku opens people's eyes to the fact that they need to hold themselves accountable. It's not good enough for us to just wait for heroes to come around and save everyone all the time. As members of humanity, it's also our responsibility to help each other. It was really nice how it was done in the second to last chapter. We see this Shigaraki-like kid coming out of the darkness, about to start his villain origin story, but he's stopped by this nice old granny who decides to reach her hand out and help him. The same granny that neglected Shigaraki out of the belief of, oh, a hero will come and save this kid anyway. I don't need to do anything. Heroes will do it all. I think another really cool way that is shown in the final chapter that the story doesn't really draw much attention to, but it's just a really cool detail. There are no giant Deku or giant Bakugo statues in the same way that there were for All Might. And it's not that people don't look up to heroes anymore. We see later on in the chapter that people clearly still do look up to heroes, but society no longer holds them up on this pedestal as if they aren't human. And even though at the end of the story Deku becomes a hero again, he realizes that he doesn't need to be. That's why Deku becoming a teacher is such a great development to me. He realizes that even without having a quirk, even without being a hero, he can still have a positive effect on society, no matter how small or unnoticed it goes. So I think as far as Deku goes, the conclusion to his character was perfect. No notes. A lot of the issues that people have had about Deku's conclusion have been people just making stupid ass inferences, like people saying that Deku's friends just don't hang out with him anymore, which the manga never said that, or that Deku and Uraraka don't talk anymore, which the story never said that. And while I feel like Deku's character was completed perfectly, I think there are other characters like Uraraka who it's kind of a mixed bag. Not because Uraraka's actual conclusion is bad, I actually think her conclusion is perfect for what her character is, but because the middle of Uraraka's character arc feels kind of directionless. Because there's a significant portion of the story where Uraraka just feels like Deku's girlfriend, and that's her only significance in the story. And I think it stays that way until they start diving more into her relationship with Toga, which I'll talk about later. But she's just another example of how hero society being reformed had a positive impact on her life. Because in the beginning of the story, we know that Uraraka is only becoming a hero because heroes make a lot of money. Because her family's broke as fuck and she want to get rich, which isn't inherently bad, but it just highlights those issues with hero society that I talked about earlier. But through her relationships with people like Deku and Toga, she gains a deeper understanding of what it really means to be a hero. She starts her own foundation for kids with fucked up quirks and shit. I think it works. It was a little sloppy getting there, but I think it works. I'm not going to talk about Bakugo here because that nigga's getting his own video. He the fucking GOAT. I just think a major issue that people have with the ending is it doesn't feel satisfying, which I can understand from the perspective of a casual reader. leader. But I think when you really look at the message of the ending of My Hero Academia and what it's trying to convey, is actually really beautiful. With that being said, let's talk about the villains, specifically the League of Villains. Because when it comes to understanding the ending of the story, I think one of the most important things is understanding the League of Villains. Mainly just Shigaraki, because I think the rest of the League of Villains are going to get their own video.
Is this nigga sick?
And Shigaraki is at the center of all the societal flaws that I just talked about. As a kid, even without knowing it, his life was already being affected by hero society. It's like all the negative shit about hero society came to affect this one nigga. The constant stress and danger that heroes are under causing his grandma to abandon the family. Then the idolization of heroes causing him to want to be a hero too. And then that idolization leading to resentment in his father, because why is everybody idolizing heroes when heroes abandon me? Which is kind of a mindset that he passes down to Shigaraki. But obviously the biggest influence on Shigaraki was All For One. And I don't know, I feel like their relationship could have been fleshed out a bit more. It feels like by the time we get to the ending of the story and their relationship becomes really important, we don't really have any reason to give a fuck about that relationship or to give a fuck about the betrayal. It's kind of a general issue I have with All For One. It feels like we weren't given any reason to actually care about his character until very late in the series. Essentially, not until he was damn near dead. But All For One is really interesting in the way that he takes advantage of people's idolization of heroes. Because All For One is smart enough to know that people can't live up to that idolization, right? So he'll come in and scoop a nigga up right when that fantasy is stripped from them, and they'll turn to a life of evil because everything that they've known in their life is a fucking lie. I think Shigaraki's conclusions have a lot of the same issues that a lot of shonen final villains have. His character arc was probably always gonna feel a little bit dissatisfying just because it had to be dragged along the entirety of the final war arc, which is a problem I've talked about in other videos. But what I really did like about All For One and Shigaraki's conclusions is the way that they were forced to fight alone while their enemies used each other's individual strengths to come together and defeat them, which also does a lot for the message that I was talking about earlier about how everyone needs to chip in and it's not just the job of the exceptional to help society. But what I really enjoyed was the way that the fight developed Deku and Shigaraki's connection, because we get the obvious thing of they both idolize heroes and have very similar origins. But I think what's really interesting about Deku and Shigaraki's fight is by the end they're fighting the same thing. In a very literal sense, they're fighting the same thing because they're both fighting All For One. But in a figurative sense, Deku is also now working to destroy the thing that Shigaraki has been trying to destroy for the entirety of the series. The fantasy created by the idolization of heroes. It's something that Deku was blinded by for basically his entire life, but Shigaraki had that stripped from him at a very young age. And in a way, by the end of the series, Shigaraki is proven right. The existence of heroes has made the everyday citizen weak, petty, and selfish. I love Shigaraki, man. I could talk about him all day. But I can't end this video without talking about people's reaction to the ending, because there are so many fundamental misunderstandings and misconceptions about the story that have just poisoned people's brain from the root. Like from the beginning of the series, so many people have misinterpreted what the message of My Hero Academia is. And I have a post here that exemplifies all the issues with how people have consumed My Hero Academia. The problem of the ending is how Deku gave up on being a hero until his friends gave him a handout. This is one of those misconceptions that has existed since basically chapter 1, that Deku getting All For One and eventually his Iron Man super suit were just handouts that were given to Deku through no hard work of his own. And it's funny because I can excuse some of the other things because they're very subtextual, but this is something that the story refutes very directly. The day Deku gets One For All Might says there's a difference between something you were born with out of pure luck and something you won after busting your ass for it, which is something that's fundamental to Deku's character. Even when Deku had zero shot of being a hero, he was still studying heroes and learning fighting techniques, which is the main reason why Deku was able to get One For All, get into UA, and learn his quirk way faster than anybody else. And this exact sentiment is refuted again in the final chapter, again by All Might. I ain't gonna lie, All Might a real nigga. Take this to heart, kid. This too is a power you've earned, fair and square. Every single person that's chipped in to give him this suit isn't just giving it to him to be nice to the nigga. They're not doing it for fucking charity. They're doing it because Deku is an important person to them that has had a major positive effect on them and the world, and they're paying him back. Both of these powers I think that Midoriya unequivocally earned through his own hard work. And I've seen this everywhere, this sentiment that Deku being a teacher means that he got complacent and gave up on being a hero. I think that's just a weird sentiment in general, as if being a teacher is supposed to be something that's beneath Deku. If anything, his job as a teacher will have an equal effect on society, even if it's less glamorous. But it's also just one of the first things that we learn in the series, and another thing that is repeated in the final chapter. Humans are not born equal, and because of that, everybody can't be a hero. Everybody doesn't have the insane physicality or the powers required to be a hero. But the point is that that those people can still be heroes in their own right. In general, I think My Hero Academia is a series that has its pros, it has its cons, but in a general sense, in an overarching sense, I think it nailed the landing. But yeah, man, that's all I got for y'all boys today. Let me know what you thought about the ending of My Hero Academia in the comments below, and comment the end if you made it here. Just confuse all the niggas that didn't watch to this point. Like the video if you liked the video, subscribe to the channel, and yeah, man, I'm gone.